Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. We're still about a week and a half away from the first time we get to watch the OTA practices, when we'll have a lot more to talk about finally watching them on the field. You only get glimpses, folks, but you start to learn a little bit about where they're at. And there were definitely things we learned last year at this time that carried over into the season. So it's always good. You can pick up clues, you can feel some vibes, and then you go from there. Got to get to the regular season. Anyways, the first time we can get out to OTAs is May 28th. So stay tuned for that. Today, I'm going to be joined by Bryant Vincent, who is the Louisiana Monroe head football coach. Now, why did I have him on? Well, for three reasons, two of which I knew going into the interview, one of which he surprised me with because I didn't realize it. So the first one is he coached Jacory Croskey-Merritt at New Mexico. He was the offensive coordinator there. So I want to bring someone on to talk about Jacory because there aren't a lot of people who can really talk about what he can do. He only played one game at Arizona, but he did play a full year for Vincent at New Mexico. So he had some really good insight onto who he is. And then also Car'lin Vigers. He coached him last year at Louisiana Monroe. He's the corner who was an undrafted free agent. Now, the way you look at it now, like will Carlin be on the roster? Hard to say because he's an undrafted free agent. Always kind of a bit of an uphill battle. They usually keep somebody from that. And I know he's a guy that before the draft, they targeted late in the draft or as an undrafted guy. They feel like there's clearly something to develop there. What is it? So I wanted to talk to Vincent about him as well. And then the third guy, he surprised me, he goes, hey, by the way, did you know I coached Jeremy Reeves in college? And he was not Jeremy's position coach because Jeremy was on defense. Vincent coaches offense, but he was an assistant head coach at South Alabama during Reeves' time there. So he gave some good insight into him and find out what he said. And just, clearly he wanted to talk about it because he brought it up. Anyways, I know with coaches, the guys who, when you talk to coaches about players they had, they're always going to say glowing things. But really, and I've always told you this, what I really want is the insight. What insight can you provide? If I were writing a story on all these players, I would definitely talk to their coaches because they know them well. Now, are they going to try and spin it in their favor? Well, sure. Of course, these are the greatest. Sure. But I really am interested in what did you see in practice from this player? What did you see about their approach? Because, usually they can kind of sugarcoat it, but when they're giving you examples, that's when I like to pay attention. So they always have something that can add a value. And I think Vincent was no different. He was able to add some insight into three different players, two of which I think you want to know, and one of which for sure, Jacorey, who I think is one of the more interesting players that we'll be talking about going into training camp in a couple months, just because he didn't get that last year at Arizona to show all that he could do. Would he have been a guy that would have been drafted a few rounds higher if he had played last year at Arizona? Possibly. Anyways, so I wanted to bring Vincent on to share some insight. So stay tuned for that in about 10 seconds. No more from me. The gold members, I'm going to do another private Zoom, not this week, but the following week. And I'm hoping to get somebody on there with me to just bring you some more insight from people who either played or cover, who are or also in the media here. Anyway, that's it for me, folks. I'll be back on Tuesday. I'll be back on Thursday as well with two more episodes this week. But today, it's Louisiana Monroe coach Bryant Vincent. Here's my conversation. All right, Coach. Well, you got a couple guys here in Washington now. I do want to start with Jacory Croskey-Merritt. You had him for a year as an offensive coordinator in New Mexico. What is it in your eyes that Washington is getting in him?
He's different. And here's the best way we got him, around towards the end of May,
Mhm.
going into the season. We had got there in December, January. We were revamping the offense, putting our offense in. We signed 27 offensive players, and we still felt like we didn't have that bell cow. And, you know, we studied Jacory, studied him, talked to him, and we were able to get him, got him on campus and ended up signing him. And from the first day that he got in workouts and running and OTAs, all that stuff, he was all business. He loved football. He was a football junkie. He was in the film room. He wanted to learn. He wanted to master the offense, whether it was protections, play actions, run game, everything. And he was the same guy every day. just his mentality and his toughness and his work ethic is what separated himself. It just from day one, he was the hardest practice player that we had on the entire team. One of the top five that I've ever had in my career, and had some good ones. By the second scrimmage, after the first scrimmage, we go through fall camp and nobody could tackle. He rushed around, I guess, around probably 180, 200 yards. And the head coach comes up to me and he goes, "We don't need to tackle this guy again. I don't need to see any more." But Bill, but Jacory, he wanted to practice, and he was upset. I mean, he was a competitor. In the season, he would carry 20, 25 carries. Monday was our off day, and we were back in it Tuesday, and he wanted to get every rep, 100 miles an hour. And, in week 7, 8, 9, 10, he's still that guy, and he's taking some, we're downhill, outside zone, inside zone, um, running offense. And he was that guy, "Coach, I got to get my reps. I got to get ready for the game." And he just would never take off. But he was a great leader, because you always have tough times, and he would never let anybody get down. He was positive. He's a guy that you want in your locker room and on your team.
So when you talk about football junkie, because I mean that says a lot. With a lot of times running backs maybe don't they're not going to watch film the way a quarterback does, right? If he's a film junkie, what things might can you recall that maybe he saw in film that maybe you saw like him applied to the field because of that film study?
He was very smart with protections. Like a lot of guys, you can hand them the ball and say your aiming point is inside
Right.
hip. You press. But he was a student of the game in their pressures, their giveaways, their safeties leverage, their to the field, whether he knew the rotation was weak or it was coming strong. He knew the giveaways of, hey, this is when they bring nickel fire, this is when they bring corner fire. So he was a detailed guy that just had a relentless mentality that you don't see much anymore. You just don't see it much anymore.
So when he goes to Arizona, he gets the one game. What were you hoping he could show at that level that maybe teams, because again, seventh round pick to me, he's could be kind of a steal here, right? So what were you hoping he could show the nation at large in the NFL what he could do in that at that level?
I really felt like he was going to be a 13 to 1,600 yard guy. He's an every down back. He's got great hands. He's physical. He understands protections. He has a relentless mentality. Carry number 12 to carry number 24 is better than the first 23. And that's something that's a quality in a back as the game goes and the harder it goes, the more he thrives. Most of he was good always in the first half, but you look at his third and fourth quarter stats. They in the big close games they just jumped because he's got that warrior mentality and that warrior spirit.
Well, you guys had, I think, at the end of the 1 year in New Mexico, an overtime game. Was it against Utah State? I think it was, where he has like over 200 yards. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It is because as the game goes, and he would just keep coming and keep coming. Fresno, you can go back to the
Yeah.
Fresno State game. He was an animal, just a workhorse. And he was those guys that you had to be careful how many carries you gave him because he was a battering ram, with everything he had every snap.
I think that's one thing that stands out when you watch him. He's a violent runner. He said he likes to run with anger. So was when you see that in practice, like you saw that, like, but how often would you see like how would you see defenses or players, opposing players react to that? Like what does it do to them?
Well, I think it kind of shocks him
Mhm.
because he's not running. He's not a finesse guy. He's going to run right at you, and he's going to
Right.
lower his pads on you. But he can also put his foot in the ground and make you miss and hit it down the sideline. So he's violent. That's the best way to describe his running a bit, his running style. He's a violent runner. When we watched the Alabama State film, I think he rushed for like 350 yards that year. And I said, guys, put him in the pistol, put him in, do what we do with this kid, with his, you know, style and his mentality. And we knew guys that knew him that had played with him, whether it was Jeremiah Hickson, or being from the state of Alabama, which we spent 27 years in, we knew, him playing at Sidney Lanier, what kind of kid, and
Mhm.
he loved football. He was a worker. He's a tough kid, and he chose to stay home close to family at Alabama State, and we were able to get him to give him a shot to play, to show so he could see what he was in Division I football.
What do you think maybe he was lacking a little? I don't know if that's the right word, but lacking to maybe not get certain looks earlier or to fall to the seventh round. I know that might be an NFL question, but from your perspective, what were some things that maybe say like maybe he has to show this at the next level?
I think probably that he only played one game
Okay,
last year. I think it left some questions open, and is he still in the same shape? All the things that how much does it mean to him? Is he still like when you only play in one game? What did you do during that time?
sure.
And he trained. He's relentless. He showed great perseverance, I think, throughout all of this last fall to show who he is still today.
Well, and that's the other thing that stood out that people talked about is that he was in every meeting. He was still showing up and all that. Are you surprised to hear that? Doesn't
I'm
sound.
not. I'm not, because that's exactly who he is. He's just not going to give in. He's just not going to be. He's got that I'm never going to be denied mentality, whatever I have to go through. And those kids, it's easy to be good when things are good. But who are you when things are bad is who you really see who they are. And I think that's a perfect example of him showing who he really is.
You brought being a three down back as a receiver out of the backfield. How do you think? What do you think of him there?
I think he's got great hands. He's got great hands. You know, we probably didn't get him the ball enough out of the backfield because he was our best running back. He was our most physical, dominant runner. And our number two guy broke his ankle against Wyoming. So,
Hmm.
we wanted to make sure that he got his enough carries for us to have a shot to win the game. We had to get Jacory going.
The last two games of that year, again, we brought up Utah State and Fresno State, both games over 200 yards. What do you remember about those games, and what stood out about the obviously success in the run game is more than just one guy, but that's a hell of a stat line. So, what do you remember about his games in those back-to-back weeks?
Going into Fresno State, they had a really good team. They were hot. They were right there at the verge of playing for the conference championship. Quarterback gets hurt. Really good player. I forgot his name, but he was a great player. And we had to win that game, to really have a shot, you know, to get that 5-7. We know the bowl games were going to be minimum that year. And we were going there and they were really good. But I remember him bringing confidence and spreading confidence to the team because he was so focused and he practiced so hard and it meant so much. You're either an influencer in a good way or a bad way. There's really no in between. But I think his influence as a leader, as a worker, as a warrior, he just and his style, and you watch that game, how hard everything it meant to him. He was just taking dudes for an extra 4 or 5 yards, and it's just inspiring to the team. And we were able to pull off that big win. That's the first time New Mexico, I think, had won at Fresno in 17 years or something crazy
Oh,
like
wow.
that.
Yeah, and when you have a guy like that in practice, as you said, do you remember because sometimes like I hear this here, right? Some guys are like, dude, slow down a little bit here. You're killing us. Would guys, I don't know about complain is the right word, but how would the defensive players in practice react to him?
You know what? They knew there wasn't, I wouldn't say complain, but they're like, Coach, come on, because all you were allowed to do was thud him up,
Okay.
on certain days, and there were times we just say tag off on Jacorey because he was coming.
Mm.
There wasn't a slow rep of him in practice. And it got to the point where, they weren't hitting him a couple times, and Jacory would be like, Hey, get me ready for the game.
Mm.
Hit me. Let's go. I gotta feel it, and he was that guy. He embraced the preparation because he knew that when it came game time, he was always going to sink to his level of preparation and he was going to do everything he could to prepare to be the best.
Last thing in him, and I would ask you about Carlin Vigers in a second. With Jacory, someone like that is going to be highly competitive. How else did you see that? What other ways would you see him that come out with him?
in the weight room, like he was push people, he would push himself. He attacked the weight room like he was running the football. It was the weight room, the bars and the weights, whether we were benching, squatting, power clean, it was competitive. And he lifted the weight room. He lifted those people because he was so intense and so urgent in weightlifting. And then when we'd go out and run or do OTAs, it was all business. How he warmed up, how he prepared, how he practiced, how he went on and off the field, everything was it was business and it was done the right way. And he helped us have the biggest offensive turnaround in college football that year.
So now Car'lin Vigers, and he's a guy that I know was Washington liked him before the draft, and they certainly went out and signed him. So clearly they still like him. And he's an undrafted free agent, but I think he's a guy that's going to probably be one of those guys you talk about in camp. So what are they getting in him?
You're getting a great kid. I mean, I know that takeout, he's 6'2", 185, 90 pounds, and he can run and he's long. He was a good tackler, played safety a lot, made about what, 70 some, 80 some tackles his junior year. We felt like we could play him at corner and he could be one of those lockdown corners for us. But the thing about it, he's a great teammate. He's a great person. He's got a great heart. He's got extremely talented. And again, he's one of those. To me, it's the type of kid we try to keep and recruit the type of kid here, and
Mhm.
he's the right type of kid that he's going to go in, he's going to grind, it's going to mean something to him. He's very selfless. He's not a selfish person. He's a great teammate. He's got a lot of length. He can be physical. He can tackle. He can cover. He can run. He can put his foot in the ground and change direction. So he's a guy that could go out there and make a 53-man roster. He really could.
So before the draft, and I was talking to somebody about him, said, watch his game against Texas and Matthew Golden. So I did. Now it's hard to watch a TV copy and focus on a corner, right? But when you
Right.
watch him, like I didn't see Golden doing a whole lot against him. Why was he effective against him?
I just think in that moment that's a lot of those guys, and when you're in the group of five and you have your opportunity to play those Power Four schools, a team like Texas or a team like Auburn, it gives you that opportunity to go against the best. And I think those are the times that you can prove if you can really compete at that level with the elite or not.
What was he able to do to take some of the stuff away from him? And why was he effective as a corner in that game, do you think?
I think just because he's got his length. And if he gets up on you, he can redirect you, he can reroute you, he can widen you, he can break up passes. He can recover and be able to break up balls because of his length and his ability.
So he had the basketball background. He played that mostly growing up. How did you see that on the field? Like how those skills translate to what he's doing as a corner?
I just think just being in command, being a leader, being kind of a guy in the back end that keeps everybody straight, but also being a leader because you go through tough times in this program, and he'd been here.
Yeah.
That it's easy to give in. It's easy to get negative. It's easy to pick up my toys and go to another place. But he wanted to stay. He wanted to help build this program. It meant something to him, and he led by example. Every day he led by example on his work ethic and his mentality.
As a corner, you use him at corner safety. What skills let him do that, and where do you feel maybe he's best? I know it's going to be up to them, but I'm curious, like why you guys, what maybe enabled him to go back and forth between that spots or play both, I should say.
Me personally, I think he's a boundary corner
Okay.
because of his length,
Yeah.
because he is physical. He will put his face on you because of safety and being able to tackle. So, a lot of people, they want to be able to push crack and leave the corner, or they want to be able to not count the corner as a physical presence in the run game. And I think he gives you that option to be a physical boundary corner with great length.
You talk a lot about his leadership. Like, how did you see that play out?
Really, as the season went and it got tough, but even when we first got here and this place was in shambles and everybody was just negative, it was just down. He and Carl Glass, there's about six
Okay.
seniors that led in January, February. They believed, and they led by example to help take that first big step to get this program in the right direction.
Awesome. And
Mm.
Coach, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for sharing the insight on both those players.
Yeah, you know a guy I coached for 3 years, Jeremy Reeves at South Alabama.
Okay, well, let's talk about him. I did not realize that, and I should have, and I apologize. But he's one of my absolute favorites. And it's funny because some of the stories here, like I'm looking at some of these guys like this reminds me of Jeremy. What do you remember about him? Because this is a guy that's like, man, that he was cut every year for a number of years, and he kept coming back and he made them keep him.
He is the ultimate teammate, the ultimate positive energy, never gets down, never gives up, fight through adversity. He was going to Wisconsin. He's from Pensacola. I was at South. I was the offense coordinator at South, and we signed him. And it was a fight, man. We fought like hell to get him. And he had an offer to Wisconsin. We got him to stay home, 4 year starter, just smart
Yeah.
leader, gonna be in the right spot at the right time, at the right place. He does everything right. He loves people. He brightens up a room. When he walks in a room, he brightens up a room, and people are just he's like a magnet. They're attracted to him because he's about the right stuff. I felt in my heart he'd be hard for somebody to get rid of because he's just an asset to the organization in every way you look.
You
Every
know,
way you look.
it's funny you say that because I always joke with people like, as long as there's one or two other people in the locker room, Jeremy's going to be hanging out there because he loves being in there, and he is. You can feel that he feeds off the energy of that room in a very positive way. And it's was he like was he as determined back then? Because this is like that's the number one word I'd use for him is determined, resilient, right? Was he how did you see that back then?
Every day. He's in that top five of the hardest workers, practice players I've ever had in my life. I'm talking in the weight room and speed, anything and everything. Recruiting, he was our ace recruiter because he would always host because he was just so real and genuine and people loved him. I told him all the time, him and my son's really close.
Mm.
I got one of his jerseys he gave to my youngest son, who's now a walk-on receiver here for us, going into his sophomore year, a signed jersey, and my youngest son looked up to him because he would always find him. They played the video game together. He was just, I kid him all the time. I said, dude, you're going to be the mayor of Pensacola or Mobile whenever you go back home.
Oh, I could definitely see that. I mean, he is deeply popular. And it's funny because, again, 2018 to 2000, I think it was 22, he was cut. Or no, the first 4 years he was cut. And he finally made the final 53 out of camp in 2022, and he becomes a Pro Bowl player. Do you remember that scene where they told him about the Pro Bowl?
I do. I do. Where they called him into the
Yeah.
office. Oh,
What did you think about that? How did that hit you?
it just hit me that when you do all the little things right and people are important and you sell out to your mission and do it the right way, that it is rewarded. His wife, who's his fiance, his
Yeah.
wife, she played volleyball here at ULM.
Oh, okay.
She's from this university, and I knew it. And we had a safety that left here this year about 2 weeks ago, Wydett Williams, that reminded me a lot of Jeremy Reeves.
Really.
And he went to Ole Miss. I hate the spring portal with a passion, but
Yeah.
he's the best safety I've had since Jeremy Reeves.
Wow. And that says a lot. And like I said, like I just appreciate because he kept all the times he get cut, they get the letter of notification on it. He's kept them all. But
Oh yeah.
used it as fuel. And it's like, as long as you're still coming back and put me on the practice squad, I have a chance.
Yep.
And it's like I think he's such a great lesson for anybody in perseverance, determination, and belief in yourself.
Yep. The thing I tell people about him, I said, the will of a man is a powerful, powerful thing, as long as you're not willing to let it ever be broken. And Jeremy's will, when you see Jeremy, you say Coach Vincent said hello at ULM.
I'm going to text him right after this, but it is funny because like he got chastised by the coaches a couple years ago in spring practice because he was like really aggressive, and he's like, he kind of knocked into a guy in a spring ball practice, and they didn't want him to do that. And he's like, you only know one way, and that's the hard part. I'm trying to make this roster. I'm determined to do this, and you get in trouble, but like you'd rather have that than
No, no doubt. No doubt about it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought him up, and I appreciate that. So thank you, thank you very much for. I didn't realize that you would coach him, so I'm glad that I found that you said that because he's a really good guy and a really good player for this franchise. So now you got a
He's
couple
on.
other guys here too. So,
What's
um,
crazy is I've been a Washington Redskins fan my whole
oh
life.
really?
My whole from Joe Theismann to the Hogs to Mark Riggins to Art Monk. Like I've been a Redskins fan my whole life, and us and finally winning as the Commanders this year
Yeah.
and making a run was very reviving.
It's been people ask me what the difference is like at night and day. It's like night and day doesn't describe what the difference is over the last couple of years and getting a quarterback like Jaden, but then I think these guys have a good plan and they're implementing it. So I think you're going to enjoy a few more years of watching these guys for sure. Now you got a couple more guys on
I
this
know,
roster.
now I'm a big time fan. I'm a big
Yeah,
time fan.
there you go. Coach, thank you very much for all this. This was fantastic. I appreciate it.
You're great, John. Thank you. And I appreciate you, buddy, and good luck. And if I can ever do anything else, you reach out.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bryant Vincent for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Tuesday with another episode. So I'll talk to you next time.